I stood in our bedroom, his side of the closet still full of clothes. His favorite blue sweater. The worn leather jacket I'd given him for our 20th anniversary. The collection of ties our grandchildren had gifted him over the years. It had been 14 months since John passed away, and I hadn't moved a single item. Every time I tried, my hand would freeze midair, as if touching his things might somehow erase what little I had left of him. The house felt both empty without him and overwhelmingly full of memories. I was drowning in 42 years of our shared life, unable to move forward, yet knowing I couldn't stay suspended in this grief-filled limbo forever. When my daughter Sarah gently suggested I consider downsizing, my first reaction was absolute refusal. How could I possibly sort through our life together and decide what to keep and what to let go? Every item held a memory, a moment, a piece of the life we'd built. The task seemed impossible, insurmountable. But as the months passed, I began to realize that this large family home that once bustled with life had become a museum of memories that was keeping me tethered to the past. I'm Elizabeth, and this is the story of how I finally found the strength to downsize. After losing my husband, not just the physical process of sorting through possessions, but the emotional journey of learning to honor memories without being imprisoned by them. If you're facing a similar challenge, whether from the loss of a spouse, a parent, or any loved one, I hope my experience might offer some comfort and perhaps a roadmap for your own journey. The turning point came on what would have been our 43rd anniversary. I woke up that morning, and for the first time, I didn't immediately reach for John's pillow. Instead, I found myself remembering our last anniversary together, how we'd laughed over breakfast, reminiscing about our honeymoon. And in that moment, I realized something profound. John wasn't in his clothes or his workshop tools or even in the house we'd shared. He was in my heart, in my memories, and those would travel with me wherever I went. That day, I called Sarah and told her I was ready. Ready to start the process of downsizing, of creating a new life that honored John but wasn't defined solely by his absence. What followed was the most challenging, emotional, and ultimately healing experience of my life. The first step was acknowledging that downsizing after losing a spouse isn't just a practical matter, it's a deeply emotional process intertwined with grief. Grief doesn't follow a timeline, and there's no right moment to begin this journey. Some people find comfort in making changes quickly, while others, like me, need more time. What matters is that you move forward when it feels right for you, not when others think you should. I learned this lesson the hard way. 3 months after John passed, well-meaning friends suggested I get on with things by clearing out his belongings. Their pressure only made me cling more tightly to his things. It wasn't until I made the decision for myself that I could actually begin the process. The first area I tackled was John's workshop. As a retired carpenter, this space had been his sanctuary. Tools lined the walls, projects in various stages of completion occupied every surface, and the smell of wood and varnish still lingered in the air. I stood in the doorway for nearly an hour that first day, unable to cross the threshold. The memories were so vivid, I could almost hear the sound of his sanding block or his whistle while he worked. Sarah had suggested I start with the easiest areas, but I knew differently. I needed to begin with the space that held the strongest connection to John, the place where his absence felt most acute. By facing this most difficult area first, everything else would be manageable by comparison. I decided to approach the workshop methodically, dividing items into categories: tools he had used daily that represented his passion, specialty tools that others could use, unfinished projects and materials. For each category, I asked myself different questions. For his everyday tools, his father's hand plane, his favorite hammer with the worn handle that perfectly fit his grip, I asked, does this truly represent John and our life together? Would keeping this item honor his memory, or just preserve a moment in time? Some tools I kept, not because I would use them, but because they told the story of the man I loved. For other items, I asked more practical questions. Would John want these gathering dust, or being used by someone who would appreciate them? That perspective shift was crucial. Instead of seeing the distribution of his belongings as losing pieces of him, I began to see it as extending his legacy, allowing the things he valued to continue having purpose. John's brother, also a woodworker, came to help. Together we sorted through specialized tools, him explaining the purpose of gadgets I'd never understood. He took some items, promising they would be used in projects for family members. That felt right, John's tools continuing to create beautiful things for people he loved. The unfinished projects were hardest. Each represented dreams and plans cut short. There was the dollhouse he'd been building for our youngest granddaughter, the bookshelf he'd designed for our son's new home. I made decisions I never thought I could, asking his brother to complete some projects, documenting others with photographs before letting them go, and giving myself permission to leave some dreams unfinished, just as life sometimes is. By the end of 2 weeks, the workshop had been transformed. Not emptied, I'd kept meaningful items that would move with me, but purposefully curated. Items had been gifted to family members who would use and cherish them, donated to a vocational school for young carpenters, or set aside for my new, smaller home. The workshop no longer felt like a shrine or a museum, but like a life well lived, whose influence continued to ripple outward. With the workshop behind me, I gained confidence to tackle other areas. The process taught me important lessons about downsizing after losing a spouse that might help. Others facing similar challenges. First, I learned to distinguish between the memory and the object. John's favorite coffee mug didn't contain his memory. I carried that with me. Taking a photograph of meaningful items before passing them along helped bridge this gap. Now I have a digital album of John's treasures that takes up no physical space but preserves the visual memory. Second, I discovered the power of involving family in the process. Not just for practical help, but for the emotional support and shared memories. When my grandchildren helped sort through John's book collection, they shared stories of him reading to them, memories I hadn't heard before. These moments became an unexpected gift, adding new dimensions to my understanding of the man I'd shared my life with. One Saturday, my son and his family came to help with John's closet. As we sorted through his clothes, my teenage grandson tried on his grandfather's leather jacket, the one from our anniversary. It fit him perfectly, and the look on his face when I told him he could keep it. That moment transformed the jacket from a painful reminder of loss into a connection between generations. The joy of seeing John's beloved possessions bringing happiness to others became a crucial part of my healing. The third lesson was perhaps the most important. Downsizing isn't just about letting go, it's about making room for what comes next. Each box I packed or gave away created space, not just in my home, but in my heart and mind. Space for new experiences, new memories, a new chapter that honored the past without being consumed by it. This became clear when I finally tackled our bedroom. For months, I'd slept on my side of the bed, leaving his undisturbed. The nightstand still held his reading glasses, his medicine, the book he never finished. As I carefully packed these items, I realized I was not just clearing physical space, but giving myself permission to reclaim the entire room. That night, I slept in the middle of the bed for the first time since he'd gone, a small act of moving forward that felt monumental. Throughout this process, I discovered practical strategies that made the emotional journey more manageable. Setting time limits was essential. Working for no more than 3 hours at a time prevented emotional exhaustion. Creating a decision later box for items I couldn't immediately resolve gave me permission to move forward without forcing painful choices. I also found that categorizing items by emotional weight rather than by room or type was more effective. I separated possessions into 3 groups: items with deep emotional significance that I might keep, useful items with moderate emotional attachment that might go to family or close friends, and practical items with minimal emotional connection that could be sold or donated. This system acknowledged that not all of John's possessions held the same emotional weight. His everyday tools were deeply significant, while the collection of sports memorabilia in the basement, though valuable, didn't resonate with core memories of our life together. The everyday items proved surprisingly challenging. The half-used bottle of aftershave in the bathroom cabinet, his reading chair with the indentation still shaped to his body, the garden tools with dirt still embedded from his last day working in the yard. These ordinary objects carried the imprint of daily life and routine, making them powerfully evocative. I learned to give these items special attention, understanding that sometimes the most mundane possessions can trigger the most profound grief. For these, I developed a ritual of acknowledgement, holding each item, speaking aloud a memory associated with it, and consciously deciding its fate. This mindfulness transformed the process from merely sorting possessions into a meaningful act of remembrance and transition. 6 months into my downsizing journey, I found myself ready to make decisions about my living situation. The family home, with its 4 bedrooms and large yard, had become both a financial burden and a physical one. Maintaining it alone was exhausting, and the empty spaces echoed with absence. I began exploring smaller homes in a community not far from my daughter. The process of imagining a new space, one that had never known John, but would be filled with carefully chosen items that represented our life together, was both terrifying and exhilarating. I found myself thinking about colors I liked, layouts that would work for my current life, features that would make entertaining grandchildren easier. These thoughts felt like small acts of courage, tiny steps toward a future I was starting to believe might hold joy again. The home I eventually chose was nothing like our family house, a modern townhome with an open floor plan instead of our traditional colonial. This deliberate difference helped. I wasn't trying to recreate what I'd had with John, but building something new that still honored our shared past. As moving day approached, I faced the final and perhaps most significant phase of letting go, saying goodbye to the home itself. The house where we'd raised our children, celebrated holidays, weathered storms both literal and figurative. The garden where John had spent countless happy hours. The kitchen where we danced on quiet evenings. The night before the movers came, I walked through each empty room, allowing memories to surface. In our bedroom, I remembered nights of whispered conversations and morning light across his sleeping face. In the living room, Christmas mornings and family game nights. In the kitchen, his failed attempts at soufflés that became family jokes. I cried, of course. But for the first time, the tears felt cleansing rather than drowning. That night, I slept on a mattress in the master bedroom, the house echoing around me. And in the quiet darkness, I felt a profound sense of completion. The house had served its purpose beautifully, sheltering our love story through decades. Now it would welcome a new family, new memories, new life. There was rightness in that continuation, a sense that nothing truly valuable was ending, just changing form. The actual move brought unexpected moments of joy. Seeing my carefully chosen possessions arranged in new spaces gave them fresh significance. John's reading chair, now positioned by a sunny window overlooking a small garden, no longer seemed a painful reminder of emptiness, but a comfortable spot that carried good memories. The quilt we'd received for our 25th anniversary, now displayed on a wall rather than folded in a linen closet, became art that told our story. In my new home, I created what I call a living memorial, a beautiful cabinet where I keep a rotating selection of John's possessions and our shared treasures. Unlike the untouched shrine his closet had become, this space changes with the seasons and my emotional needs. Sometimes it holds his pocket watch and wedding ring, sometimes photographs from vacations, sometimes simply a stone from a beach we loved. This dynamic approach allows me to honor him without freezing time. It's been 3 years now since I began my downsizing journey. The process that I thought would diminish John's memory has instead distilled it to its most precious essence. By thoughtfully choosing what to keep, what to share, and what to release, I've created a life that carries forward the best of what we built together while making space for new experiences. I've learned that downsizing after losing a spouse isn't about erasing the past or moving on, in the sense of leaving someone behind. It's about integration, weaving the threads of that love into a new pattern, one that acknowledges both what was lost and what remains. The items I chose to keep have taken on deeper significance precisely because they were consciously selected. John's presence in my life is no longer represented by an overwhelming accumulation of untouched possessions, but by meaningful objects that actively connect me to our shared history while allowing me to live fully in the present. Perhaps most surprisingly, this journey of downsizing became a crucial part of my grief process. By physically sorting through the material evidence of our life together, I was also sorting through my emotions, my memories, my understanding of who we were as a couple, and who I am now as an individual. Each decision about an object became a small step in rebuilding my identity and reimagining my future. If you're facing the daunting task of downsizing after losing a spouse or loved one, please know that there's no right timeline and no perfect approach. Your journey will be as unique as your relationship was. But I hope sharing my experience offers some comfort and perhaps a few practical insights for your path. Start when you're ready, not when others think you should. Take it slowly, with compassion for yourself. Involve supportive family members who understand this is both a practical and deeply emotional process. Create systems that acknowledge different levels of attachment to different possessions. Document items with photographs before letting them go. Consider how gifting meaningful items to people who will use and cherish them extends your loved one's legacy rather than diminishes it. Remember that downsizing isn't just about letting go. It's about making intentional choices about how you'll carry your loved one's memory forward. It's about creating space for both remembrance and new experiences. It's about honoring the past while still embracing the possibility of joy in the future. I still miss John every day. There are still moments when grief catches me unaware. But I no longer feel trapped by it or by the physical remnants of our life together. Instead, I've created a life that honors him through thoughtful presence rather than preservation, that celebrates what we shared by continuing to find meaning and purpose. If you're just beginning this journey, know that there is hope ahead. The process of downsizing after loss, though painful, can become an unexpected path toward healing, a way of transforming a house full of memories into a heart full of love that you carry with you always. Thank you for listening to my story. If you found it helpful, please consider sharing it with someone who might need to hear that moving forward is possible, even when it seems impossible. And remember, the objects we cherish are precious not for what they are, but for the love they represent, a love that remains with us, regardless of what we keep or what we let go.